Привязали за руки, подвесили, а так.
Tied by the hands, hung like this backwards, and started beating.
From the first day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Oleg and his large family tried not to appear on the street. Sometimes from the balcony they saw how numerous enemy vehicles were moving through the village and Russian soldiers were walking around with machine guns at the ready. On March 17th, an armored personnel carrier with 24 armed soldiers drove into his courtyard.
Они заскочили, положили нас всех на землю.
They jumped in, put us all on the ground. Even a 4-year-old child was also put on the ground. They asked me a question about my last name. I said Diggle. They said yes, it is him. Well, they blindfolded us, tied our hands behind us and took me, my son and nephew, put me in some kind of vehicle and brought me to the basement.
Russian servicemen set up a torture chamber in the basement of building of the railway station. Oleg says that the Russian occupiers beat the captives incessantly. What exactly they wanted to know was not clear. He is sure they beat him simply to hurt and humiliate him. He remembers that he was mentally preparing himself to withstand all the torture.
Начали колоть мне какие-то уколы в ноги.
They started giving me injections in the leg. We were beaten. They said we'd beat your meat from the bone, so that you would continue to be a disabled person. And we cut off your legs there, and all that. They were surprised that our Ukrainian people are inviolable. So they were all waiting for a person to wet himself or something.
Oleg withstood all the torture, so the jailers began to blackmail him with children.
Они сказали, что сейчас привезут мою 17-летнюю дочь.
They said that now they would bring my 17-year-old daughter, untie my eyes and rape her right there altogether, and it would be on my conscience. Thank God they didn't do it.
Then they again took him to the basement and began to beat his son before his eyes.
Я кричал.
I screamed that my son has been a disabled child since he was 2.5 years old. He is now 29-year-old, but he has hemophilia, poor blood clotting. I just asked not to beat him. Beat me, but don't touch my son.
Together with them in the basement was a guy who served in the anti-terrorist operation. These were the ones the Russian military were looking for when they came to the village.
Этот человек просто вот... Он вот так от меня опирался, поднимался и говорит, отец.
This man just leaned on me, like that, got up and said, we must save the children. He stood up and said, glory to Ukraine. And these freaks started beating him. They beat us very hard and we stood up, one by one, and said this. They were really angry about it.
What happened to this man now, Oleg does not know. He, his son and nephew were held for 4 days. The man was released only 8 days later. Before that, the Russian invaders tortured him with electricity.
I have a big desire to live, to win, when Ukraine will be completely free, and Donbass to be ours, and Crimea to be ours.
Yevdokia is 97 years old. She survived 2 occupations during World War II. The village of Kozacha Lopan was captured by the Germans. This year, from February to September, grandmother Yevdokia watched the Russian occupation with horror. She assures that the Germans behaved more loyally.
There was no such atrocity as the Russians are doing. Houses were not looted. People were not killed. How did the Russian soldiers behave? I had never thought that they would treat the Ukrainian people in a brutal way, atrociously.
The woman worked as a school teacher for 30 years. She told the children how hard it was to survive World War II. Kozacha Lopan withstood the German occupation. The village was not destroyed. Now the Russian soldiers have practically left no stone unturned.
In order to cause people to hate Ukraine, they themselves fight at Kozacha Lopan. They put the artillery right there, at the factory, and ours saw that they were turning the guns around the firing at Kozacha Lopan. But they do not shoot where they are located themselves, but shoot at the part where they are not.
Her house was searched. A number of soldiers searched every room. They even climbed into the attic and into the basement.
A tank or an armored personnel carrier drove into our lane, and a soldier was sitting on it. The machine gun sat in front of him to be ready to shoot. We went to our houses. 14 soldiers entered our house.
The Russian military took away cars from her son and grandson, but grandmother Yevdokia reacted philosophically to this. Most importantly, she says that everyone in her family is alive. Until February, more than 6,500 residents lived in Kozacha Lopan. After the deoccupation, there were 3 times less people left. The exact number of dead, missing and deported to Russia is still unknown. Reported by Serhiy Kulyas, Nadia Sukharukova, UATV News.